What is up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I've got a brand new deck profile for you guys. This is going to be a Trap, Burning Abyss, Dogmatika Control type deck. And so there's a lot going on here, but I do think there's a lot of really good synergy between the Trap, Burning Abyss deck and then the Dogmatika engine. And so, for example, the Dogmatika engine gives you access to the best trap in the game right now, with that being Dogmatika Punishment, but the Burning Abyss engine can help you get to that too by using Absolute King Backjack. And so we have access to the best trap card in the game, and that really helps the Burning Abyss engine out because it adds another element of control while also giving you access to really cool extra deck monsters such as Psyframe Lord Omega. You can use Omega's graveyard effect to shuffle back your Beatrice and get more efficiency out of your BA engine. But also it gives you access to cards like Cologne, which can discard from your hand to the graveyard and trigger your Burning Abyss effects. And so there's a ton of really cool synergies in this deck that I think a lot of you guys are going to enjoy and have fun with, especially if you love Burning Abyss even half as much as I do. But let's go ahead and get into this profile. Well, actually, before getting into the profile, if you would like to support the channel, please consider doing so by liking this video and or subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps the channel out a ton. Plus, I try to upload around 1 to 2 times per week, and by subscribing, you're making sure that those new videos are hitting your subscription feed, and by clicking that notification bell, you're going to be notified of every single time. And I promise you won't be disappointed because every single video is at least as awesome as this one's going to be. And so definitely subscribe and click that notification bell. But let's go ahead and get into the actual profile. So starting with the Burning Abyss engine, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Skarm, 1 copy of Seer, 1 copy of Graph, and then 1 copy of Libic. Then we also have 3 copies of Farfa, 1 copy of Barbar, Alec, and then Calcab. And so this makes up our entire Burning Abyss engine. It's not a huge number of BA monsters, but it's enough to really get our engine going and to consistently be able to get into Dante and then Beatrice. All of these Burning Abyss monsters have very useful effects. I think the most notable ones being Farfa. This is going to be your main form of disruption by sending it to the graveyard with like Beatrice, Fiend Griefing, or discarding it for Cologne if you draw a punishment. So you have a ton of disruption coming from Farfa. But then also Alec is also very, very useful for negating trigger effects as well as ignition effects. So it's really good against cards like Anaconda. So they can summon Anaconda and they're going to maybe try to go to a Red Eyes Dragoon. You can just negate the Anaconda with Alec. Or you could just banish it with Farfa, of course. But Alec is just another way for you to interact with your opponent if you've already used Farfa. But also, it's really good against the Dogmatikas in particular because when they activate Ecclesia's effect in hand at Chain Link 1, you can at Chain Link 2 use an effect to send Alec to the graveyard. Then in a separate chain, Ecclesia's own field effect, the Search, will activate, and you can negate that with the Alec. And so that's a very big interaction against Dogmatika Synchro Elvish, against Invoked Dogmatika, and really against any Dogmatika deck. And they're very, very popular right now. And so that's a huge interaction. Really, all of these are good, but obviously this is pretty much it for the Burning Abyss engine. They're also all extenders, which is really useful when you're going second and trying to break opponents' boards. You have so many plays with the Burning Abyss engine. Next we have 2 copies of Tour Guide, 2 copies of Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and then 1 copy of Absolute King Backjack. And so I'm only playing 2 copies of Rhino Warrior because I didn't want too many normal summons in the deck. I could definitely see bumping that up to 3 because it is just so good having access to any of your Burning Abyss cards, access to Backjack, also really good in your follow-up plays for helping your BA monsters not destroy themselves. So Rhino Warrior is really, really good, but at the same time, you don't want to have it with a Tour Guide or with a Backjack, and sometimes not even with an Ecclesia because it can kind of clog if you need to normal summon that Ecclesia. And so I felt that 2 is kind of a correct number here, but I could definitely understand bumping it up to 3. And then only 1 copy of Backjack because we do have very easy access to it because it is a Fiend type actually. And so that means that we can send it to the graveyard with Rhino Warrior or with Fiend Griefing. And so we have very easy ways of accessing Backjack, and then Backjack gives us potentially access to other trap cards. Or we can also use it to stack the deck and then put like a Farfa or an Alec on top, then use Backjack's graveyard effect to mill it and then trigger the effect that way. And so you can use it to either set up your trap cards or to set up your Burning Abyss cards. So you can really get creative with Backjack, and that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy about it and enjoy about this deck. You can play very creatively, and really it gives you the tools that you need to kind of pick apart opponents' decks and strategies and then capitalize on it. And so definitely love Backjack at 1. You don't want to play too many because drawing it isn't that good. and it's kind of difficult to get out of your hand at times, but one copy is more than enough. No, not more than enough, it's just right, but yeah. That's it for those. Moving on to the Dogmatika engine, we play 3 copies of Nadir's Servant, 3 copies of Ecclesia, 1 copy of Fleur de Lis, and then 3 copies of Punishment. And so really I think Nadir's Servant's probably the best spell card out of Rise of the Duelist, so we definitely want to play this at 3. Ecclesia I kind of waffled around between 2 and 3 because you don't necessarily want to see multiples, but having more of them in your deck really allows the deck to grind out more, because there are a lot of games to where you just like Ecclesia search Punishment, and then Punishment dump Titanclad, special Ecclesia search Punishment, and it's just giving you a constant stream of disruption between that, the Fleur de Lis, and whatever you're sending to the graveyard with the punishments. And so I really do like Ecclesia at 3, especially in grind games. And while the format is very fast right now and you don't find yourself grinding in every matchup, in the ones where you do, such as Eldritch or Invoked, having that 3rd copy of Ecclesia is actually really good. But that's pretty much it for the Dogmatika engine. For the trap cards that we play, obviously we have the 3 punishments still, but we also have 2 copies of Trap Trick, which can get to punishment or to anything else, 2 copies of Fiend Griefing, 2 copies of Dynamicious, 1 Shaddoll Schism, and then 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. And so we have a lot of traps in this deck, and all of them except for Schism are searchable by Trap Trick. So Trap Trick is kind of the key that pulls everything together. The only reason we don't play it at 3 is because it really does decrease your in-deck resources, because you're banishing one of them as well, but also you don't want to see it in multiples. It's not really that good in the late stages of the game, so I felt that 2 is good enough in combination with the Backjack to really see all of these very consistently. And so I felt this was kind of the perfect lineup. It did come down between Dynamicious and Karma Cut. They both kind of serve the same purpose, but I really like Dynamicious's ability to deal with spells and traps, and so being able to deal with Eldritch traps, being able to deal with meltdowns and stuff like that is actually really big, and I felt that put it over Karma Cut, even though Karma Cut can banish multiple monsters in the mid to late game. Another thing that comes up is summoning back the Dynamicious from the graveyard and then using that as link material. That's another really key point that I like it over Karma Cut for. But this is pretty much the trap lineup. I'd say it's pretty standard. I do see some decks not playing the Shaddoll engine, not playing cards like Schism, but I feel like in this deck in particular, it's really good for helping you build powerful boards. And because every monster in the deck is dark, it's very easy to set up a card like Winda. And so I felt that Schism is a really good addition to the deck. And again, App Cologne as well. Being able to trigger App Cologne in the graveyard can be huge. So that's pretty much it for the traps. Next we'll go into the hand traps, and for that we obviously still have the Imperms, but we also play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. And so that's it for the hand traps. 3 copies of Imperm, 3 copies of Ash. I would have loved to have fit Gamma in here as well, or even just like Veil or Ogre or something else, but in this type of deck you really don't have the space, and so we lose some of our ability to go second because we don't have as many hand traps, but at the same time we gain a much more powerful going first deck, because going first we can easily set up like Beatrice, maybe a trap or 2, and then maybe even a Winda summoned by Schism. So we can really set up these really incredible boards that I think are worth it. So that's pretty much it for the main deck. For the extra deck we play, let's see, 1 copy of Beatrice, of course, but then we have 2 copies of Dante, Cherubini, and then other Dante. I have been considering dropping this Dante because I feel like in a lot of games your opponents generally are too afraid to destroy your Beatrice, and so you're really not summoning it that often in most matchups. Like Rock's never gonna destroy it, Infernoble Knights don't have to destroy it, Dragons definitely don't, Eldritch have lore to just send it to the grave. There's so many outs to this card right now that I feel like it's almost not worth playing Dante, but in the games where it does come up, it's really, really good. And so I'm kind of on the fence about it. I'll talk about later some other cards I'm thinking about replacing it with, but I am playing it for now. And then Cherubini is another card I'm actually thinking about cutting, because in this type of deck, you're not really like wombo comboing all the time, so you don't really need Cherubini. A lot of games you're just going like Dante, Beatrice, or something like that, and then passing on whatever else is in your hand, like traps, hand traps, stuff like that. And so you really don't need Cherubini that often in this deck, but I felt that it's still necessary for some hands, especially when you're trying to end on like Appaloosa plus Beatrice, then you do need Cherubini for that play. But that's pretty much it for the Burning Abyss extra deck monsters. Next we have the aforementioned Appaloosa. We have Unicorn and IP Masquerena, which will lock up the rest of the Link monsters. I think IP and Unicorn are actually very big in this deck, because you need a generic Link too for your basic like Tour Guide or Fiendish Rhino Warrior play to end on a Beatrice. Or if you just open like Graph or Rhino Warrior in any other BA, then IP Masquerena can be very big, and it's easy to end on like Beatrice plus IP, which gives you the Beatrice disruption plus the Unicorn disruption. So I think these two are definitely necessary. Then Appaloosa is very useful for the Appaloosa Beatrice play, which is also very common, but it requires a lot of cards, like 3 to 4 BAs in hand, but it's still a good play when you're able to go into it. So I definitely think it's still worth playing. Also, you can make a big IP Masquerena play and summon it. So, very cool. And then the last Xyz monster that we play is one copy of Leviair. And I like Leviair a lot because it allows you to bring back your Backjack, then you can link away with it. Backjack will hit the grave, you get the effect again, and it kind of sets up your whole engine again. So it gives you another way to recur your engine. So I do definitely like Leviair. And it also, usually you're going to be going into Appaloosa or IP after you do that. So it kind of feeds into the other Link monsters that we already play. So there's a lot of synergy here. And then for the Dogmatika cards, or not Dogmatika cards, but the cards that I utilize with the Dogmatika engine, we have 2 copies of Intis, 1 copy of Titanclad, 1 copy of Winda, App Cologne, and then finally a Psyframe Lord Omega. So we're not summoning Omega in this deck, we're usually just sending it to the graveyard and then using the graveyard effect. And so pretty much all of these are only for their graveyard effects except for Winda, which we can summon and use, and we summon it with the Shell Schism, which we usually search off of App Cologne. So all of these cards are actually really good. Again, some changes that I was considering making to the extra deck is adding the second Titanclad to help us grind a little bit more, especially when we resolve multiple punishments. It's really nice to get that loop of like punishment, dump Titanclad, summon Ecclesia, surge punishment, and then like keep that going. That's always a really good play. Some other additions that I thought about were Access Code Talker to give you more ways to break opponents' boards, but the downside I felt with Access Code Talker was that most of the Link monsters in the extra deck are the same attribute, so you're really not able to utilize the secondary effect that much. Like, you're never going to be getting an Appaloosa engrave and then also summon Access Code. So outside of that, you only have Masquerena, Unicorn, and Cherubini, all of which are dark, so you're really not getting much out of that. Boros Sword was another consideration, but I felt that it was tough to really utilize. Zero Boros also is good, but again, not the easiest to utilize in this type of deck, especially because we often will have traps on board. We don't want to banish those too. Let's see, another thing I thought about was Shaddoll Construct, because it's not that hard to summon once you get your Dogmatika engine going, and it also gives you access to your Schism easier, because you can add it back from the grave with Construct's effect. But also in various matchups that have light monsters, summoning this off of a Schism helps you send their light monsters to the grave so that you can have another form of disruption. And then with that, I also considered playing maybe a small Shaddoll main deck engine as well, something like Dragon or Ariel, so that you can dump Ariel on the opponent's turn and banish like their Jet Synchrons or their Alistairs, stuff like that, or Dragon to maybe destroy their important back row or continuous spells that maybe need to be used. So I felt that this could also be an option. Oh, and their Beast would be another good option. But ultimately, I felt that it wasn't quite powerful enough to be worth playing cards like this in the main deck, which just aren't very good to draw in a Burning Abyss deck. Because at the end of the day, this is a Burning Abyss deck, and you need to play cards that are either good in a Burning Abyss deck or powerful enough that you don't mind drawing them as well. And I feel like that's the case with the Dogmatika engine. While there's synergy, those cards are all powerful enough that you don't mind also drawing them with Burning Abyss cards. But that's pretty much it for the extra deck. Then for the side deck, I play, let's see, 3 copies of Evenly Matched, and then 3 copies of Gamma and Driver. This is generally for going second, and then for going first, 2 copies of Artifact Scythe, 3 copies of Sanctum, then 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. And so when you're going second, I felt that Evenly and Gamma are really just enough. Between this, it was for Evenly or Lightning Storm. I liked Evenly a little bit better because with Lightning Storm, I felt that a lot of decks are just playing around it, like summoning their stuff, their monsters in defense. And then back row decks, you know, this is good against back row decks too. So this was better against both monster and back row decks. Gamma's obviously the best hand trap. And then for the going first cards, I really liked Artifact Sanctum because it's searchable off of the trap trick. So you have essentially 5 copies of it in your deck, 5 copies of a card that are going to skip your opponent's turn if they're on combo. Whereas I felt like in the main deck, we don't have enough of those cards that really shut decks down. But Sanctum is a card that really will shut them down for a turn, and there's really not much they can do about it. And so I really do like Sanctum a lot in this deck. And then with that, 2 copies of Scythe, because we do have such easy access to Sanctum, it's not out of the realm of possibility to resolve multiples. But also I do think that in playing a copy of Dragon would also be very good, maybe in the side deck, so that if we do happen to draw Scythe, we can always just resolve an App Cologne, use that to add Dragon to our hand, discard Dragon, and then use Dragon to pop the Scythe. And so this would give us a way to trigger Scythe even without summoning it with a Sanctum. So I do think Dragon might also be a really good addition to the side deck, and for that, I'd maybe cut like an Evenly or a Solemn. I think either of those would be fine to cut down to 1. But Solemn I do think is also good because when you're playing against decks, they're going to be siding in their Evenly matches and their Lightning Storms and their Red Reboots, and Solemn Judgment can negate all of those as well as just your opponent's natural plays as well, like their normal summons, their inherent other summons. And so I do think that Solemn Judgment is a powerful card as well and definitely worth playing in this deck. Even though it's not a normal trap, so you can't search it with Trap Jig, you still really want to draw this in a lot of matchups, and so I definitely have been liking this entire extra deck. But alright guys, that's pretty much it for this Trap, Control, Dogmatika, Burning Abyss deck profile. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions, feel free to let me know down in the comment section. I'll look at all of them and I'll try to reply to as many as I can. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, I will see you guys in the next one.